for joining us today. I am Marcia Laco with DEQ's Environmental Stewardship Initiative, and I want to welcome you to our third event in our Energy and GHG webinar series. We'll be learning about solar PV procurement and gaining implementation insight by reviewing Sierra Nevada strategies used at their Mills River NC facility. Assisting me are members of the ESI team, including Renee Kramer, who is going to be our WebEx technical lead, and Jesse McDonald, who's handling the question portion of today's event. Okay. The ESI program wants to thank our partners, the NC Clean Energy Technology Center, also known as CETC, and Sierra Nevada, for their willingness to share their knowledge. The Clean Energy Technology Center was founded in 1987 as the North Carolina Solar Center. And for the last 30 years, the CETC has worked closely with partners in government, industry, academia, and the nonprofit community while evolving to include a greater geographic scope and array of clean energy technologies. I personally think Sierra Nevada needs no introduction, especially for those of us who are fond of a good beer. This is the second time Sierra Nevada staff have partnered with us on a webinar. Back in March of 2021, we learned about their Bigger Than Beer sustainability initiatives, including their work with DEQ's recycling office staff to form the Western NC Brewery Recycling Cooperative. If you're interested in viewing that recording, it is available on our ESI website. I put the link in the chat box for you to access it. And we are so appreciative to have their staff joining us. And if you have not already, I highly recommend a visit to the brewery and their restaurant. Okay. Before we get started, I just wanted to review really quickly some technical information to ensure that you have a great experience. All participants have been brought and muted to avoid unintentional background noise. And we assume most of you are using your computer audio. And you can find those controls on the left side of your WebEx control panel, which should appear at the bottom of your screen. If you're having any technical issues, we're using the WebEx chat feature to communicate with participants today. And those controls are on the right side of the control panel. We encourage you to submit your questions at any time during the presentation using that chat feature. We will have a dedicated Q&A session following our presentations. When we get to the Q&A, you are also welcome to raise your hand to verbally ask a question, and Jesse will acknowledge you and unmute your mic. The hand raising feature with that little hand is located right in the middle of your control panel. And then just keep an eye on the chat box as we share program information for ourselves and our speakers. Okay. For anyone joining us today that's not familiar with the Environmental Stewardship Initiative, we are a program run through a non-regulatory part of DEQ. We report up through separate management from all of our regulatory divisions. It is a recognition and leadership program. It's voluntary for folks to join, and it's at no cost to you. We currently have about 102 members at 206 different sites across the state. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary last year, and we were designed to promote environmental excellence and adoption of sustainable practices. We try really hard to facilitate member networking and the sharing of those best practices and those successes that our members are having. We provide education, training, environmental management system assistance, and we also try to promote the achievements that our members have accomplished. One of the great features of ESI is that you get one-on-one coaching. And something we launched last year, which hopefully is of interest to you today because you're here for tackling those energy goals, is we're giving our members access to energy monitoring equipment. So if you're interested in learning more, please reach out to us. Okay. We also want to thank today Terry Albrecht with the Waste Reduction Partners. Waste Reduction Partners is a partnership between NCDEQ and the Land of Sky Regional Council. Terry was instrumental in helping us plan for this session. He's helped us host some of the other webinars in the series. So we really want to highlight Waste Reduction Partners. They're also non-regulatory and typically at no cost, depending on what grants they are using to help get that assistance out to you. They provide consulting services using a staff of retired engineers and scientists. And they will conduct on-site assessments, provide some cost-sharing strategies, and provide you with a report. They can provide assistance regarding energy management and efficiency, solid waste assistance, water efficiency. So in the chat, you've got the information to contact Waste Reduction Partners, and I know our friends at CETC will also be discussing what assistance they can provide. Okay, so our first presenters, are with the North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center. We have Isaac Panzarella, who is the Associate Director for Technology and Research at the NC Clean Tech Center, and he manages several projects that support renewable energy deployment, including the DOE Southeast On-Site Energy Technical Assistance Partnership. Joining him is Brian Lips, who is the Senior Project Manager for Policy at CETC, and he oversees the database of state incentives for renewables and efficiency, known as Desire. Desire is the preeminent resource for information on incentives and policies that support renewable energy and energy efficiency in the U.S. And I'll be entering links for CETC and Desire in the chat in just a minute. And our final presenter today is Pierce Schwab with Sierra Nevada. Pierce is the Sustainability Program Manager at Sierra Nevada's Mills River Brewery, where he facilitates initiatives to increase efficiency and reduce emissions at the only LEED Platinum production brewery in the U.S. Okay, so before we get started, we wanted to have a couple polls to help our speakers understand the audience better. All right, so they're popping up. So the first question asked, do you have solar PV installed at your site or facility? Okay, so it looks like we've got about 70% of the folks have answered. Got a couple people still in progress of answering that. Hopefully you're not running into any technological issues. All right, so Renee, I'm not seeing the numbers changing, so if you want to close that one. All right. So it looks like I'm not seeing, I don't know if I need to make my box a little wider. I'm not seeing, yes, hold on one second. Okay, so we did not have anybody answer yes, so no one's installed any solar, and about 61% said no, and then we had about 40% that did not. Were not able to participate. So Renee, if you'll launch the second poll question, hopefully you're seeing that, but we want to learn if you have already installed solar PV at your facility or site. All right, so it's looking about, the numbers are not changing, Renee, so I think you can close that one out. And so have you installed? Oh, wow, 47% have installed solar already. Awesome. Okay, so our last poll question um, wants to learn what are the motivators behind installing solar at your site. So this could be the motivators if you've already installed it or if you're looking to install some additional solar. And in answering this one, you should be able to pick more than one choice. All right, we've got some folks that are still answering. And it looks like we've just got a couple folks that are finishing up getting their answers in. All right, so Renee, if you want to close that one out. Okay, so we've got 63% of you are looking at the payback period. It looks to be among the highest reasons. Next is related to your EHS goals. Of course, it's not showing me all of them at once. Let's see if I open this box a little bigger. There we go. Okay. Oh, well, the answer's changed a little. So 48, still the highest number of payback period. Second was your ESH goals. Third, resiliency or climate adaptation. No answer, and then other. All right, great. Thank you everyone for sharing those answers with us. Okay, and I believe behind the scenes, Renee is going to be transitioning speakers. So I will stop sharing my screen. And Isaac, when you've got controls and you're ready to start.
Okay. Marcia, thank you. I'm sorry, Marcia, thank you for the great introduction for the Clean Energy Technology Center and for Brian and myself. And we really appreciate the opportunity to be here today to speak with everyone. So here at the Clean Tech Center, a little bit of what I do, my background is I'm an engineer, and my team helps end users in manufacturing and in other sectors to look at deploying solar. And that includes things like helping them with initial screenings, doing feasibility studies, and then helping them understand all the regulations and utility rules that they need to meet to do that. Brian, what he does is he manages a Desire project, and he can tell you a little bit about that, but it has a really huge repository of policies on solar and other technologies, including energy efficiency. We're going to talk about a few different aspects that are really timely and important for solar deployment today. One is the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, the changes that were instituted there, as well as another policy, MACRS, which is a depreciation policy. And then we'll talk about connecting to the grid, net metering policy, and tariffs that are available for solar in North Carolina behind the meter. And then I'll talk a little bit about analyzing solar for your site, what that process looks like a little bit. Brian's going to kick us off here today for the Clean Tech Center. So, Brian, I'll let you go ahead. We do have a small disclaimer here. We are a public agency of North Carolina, the statewide state energy center. based at NC State University, and we provide information really as a public service, and we do our best really to provide accurate information. But unfortunately, we can't warranty or represent the accuracy of the information. We do recommend that you consult a professional, either a tax professional or an engineer or whoever in the appropriate profession for the questions that you have to answer. But we're here to really help you, understand at the beginning, make a decision, and get on the right track.
All right, thanks, Isaac. So I guess first I'll talk about the Business Energy Investment Tax Credit, or as it's more commonly referred to as the ITC. This has for a long time been the main incentive at the federal level for solar and other renewable energy technologies, actually dating back to the Carter administration originally. And from that point up until a couple years ago, uh, presumably Congress's main goal with the ITC was to get solar and other renewables out there. And they didn't want to put too many other requirements upon it. But for the first time here with the IRA, Congress renewed the tax credit and extended it. We'll get into that in a couple slides. But for the first time ever, Congress also um, made some additional requirements, you might call them, or bonus credits to try to influence the way in which this technology is acquired and located and ultimately installed. So while historically this tax credit has been worth 30% of the system's cost, and that is still true for systems less than 1 megawatt, but for larger systems, the base credit is just 6% of the system's cost. Now, if you want to get that full 30% tax credit, you have to meet some labor requirements. Namely, all the workers on the project must be paid prevailing wages, and a certain percentage of workers must be certified apprentices. So there's Congress, saying it's great that this technology is out there, but we want to make sure that the jobs that this technology creates are good paying jobs. And then also, Congress wanted to make sure that there was an incentive for this equipment to be manufactured within the US rather than China or some other Asian nation. So for the first time, there's a bonus credit worth 10%. That would then get you up to 40% if you use panels that are certified domestic content. And then there's also an additional 10% available if a system is located in what the Inflation Reduction Act refers to as an energy community. That's maybe a former oil field or coal mine property, or a, a parcel or an area that has a certain percentage of its workforce historically employed by one of those fossil industries. And then there's also additional bonuses for locating systems in low-income communities or on Indian lands, or if the system benefits a certified or qualified lower or middle-income building, or relays its economic benefit to those communities. And next slide. So there's a long list of renewable energy technologies that are eligible for the ITC. The Inflation Reduction Act added a few more to this list, including standalone energy storage systems. Historically, there had been a IRS ruling that they believed that a system paired with energy storage could qualify for the tax credit, and that would include the energy storage system. But Congress in the Inflation Reduction Act went out there and said definitively that all storage qualifies. Also, thermal energy storage systems now qualify, as well as microgrid controllers and certain equipment required for interconnecting systems to the grid. And the next slide. So this kind of shows all these different bonuses, but it also shows how this credit will evolve over time. Now, historically, the credit has been 30% for most of its life. However, when Congress initially created this tax credit back during the Carter administration, it was just a 10% tax credit, and that was bumped up to 30% in the intervening years. But that 30% value always had a expiration date on it, which Congress would then fiddle with, and leading the solar industry to be a little uncertain about the future value of this credit, and also leading to a boon for the lobbying industry to always try to get this 30% extended. So with the Inflation Reduction Act, Congress thought instead of just choosing an arbitrary date to set as the end point for this tax credit, they decided to tie it to our actual greenhouse gas goals in this country. So the very earliest that this credit could expire or start phasing out would be in 2034, but that clock actually doesn't start ticking until uh, we achieve as a country a 75% annual reduction in our greenhouse gas reductions, or a 75% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from the power sector relative to 2022. So it could be that this credit's around until 2050 if we don't hit that goal. 2035 is the earliest that we could start see this going down. So Congress really, understanding why they have this credit and trying to make sure that it's around to achieve these goals. And the next slide. Another thing the Inflation Reduction Act did was there's another tax credit called the production tax credit, whereas the investment tax credit is tied to the cost of the investment. The production tax credit is tied to the actual kilowatt hour production of a system. And traditionally, the PTC, as they call it, has been geared towards larger scale systems like wind or biomass, whereas solar was more aligned with the ITC. But the Inflation Reduction Act allowed any one of these technologies to pick or choose whether they want to go the route of the ITC or PTC. In most cases, I think solar would probably be benefit more from the ITC, but Congress didn't want to decide that on their own. They're letting the industry choose that now. But similar set of bonuses in the PTC, as well as a similar step down in the PTC. And then the last kind of main federal incentive is what we call MACRS or makers, depending on who you are, but it stands for the Modified Accelerated Cost Recovery System. If you think about, maybe a company has a fleet of vehicles, and those vehicles, maybe they have a lifespan of 10, 20 years. Over time, the company can write off the value of that investment. They can claim losses and then claim deductions from their taxes based on those equipment losses. And for a fleet of vehicles with a 10-year lifespan, maybe that's just straight 10-year depreciation. So every year the company can write off 10% of the value of that fleet of vehicles. For a certain class of equipment, which includes a lot of things, not just renewables, but it does include the renewables, these technologies are eligible for this more accelerated route, which you can depreciate over the course of 6 years rather than 10 or 20 years. And then Congress over time has created certain bonus values, one-time first-year bonus values for depreciation. And so for the year 2023, a company can claim an 80% bonus depreciation this year. So immediately write off 80% of the value. And then for that remaining value, you have this accelerated life or accelerated depreciation schedule as well. But that bonus depreciation steps down over time as shown here. And then one more slide from me, I believe. One other thing to keep in mind is how you're going to be using the electricity produced by this system. We most commercial or roof-mounted systems would probably benefit from net energy metering, which allows you to use the power on site, and at any given moment when you're producing more than your facility needs, you feed that back on to the grid. But the big question is how you get credited for those exports. And all that is covered within a utility's net metering rules. Here in North Carolina, our big utility, Duke Energy, is regulated by the North Carolina Utilities Commission. And the Utilities Commission just a couple months ago ruled on new net metering rules for Duke Energy Progress, which took effect on October 1st. The new rules require that any facility with a PV system must be on a time of use rate, and the production and consumption of that facility and that PV system are netted within each of those time periods. And then if you have any excess generation within any of those time periods at the end of the month, you get credited on your next bill at an avoided cost rate. So in short, our rules are a little bit worse than they were on September 30th. And Duke Energy Carolinas is currently going through the same process with the same proposed revisions to their net metering rules. And I imagine the Utilities Commission will approve those as well, though that has not happened yet. And then for any of the co-ops or munis in the state, to the extent that any of you are a customer of one of those utilities are self-governing, and so it's really up to them what they want to make available. And so I would recommend you contact the utility and see if they offer net metering and what those rules are if they do offer it. And I'll hand it over to Isaac now. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. So I want to pick up where Brian left off and talk about some different distributed solar PV policies and procurement options in North Carolina. One of them is net metering, and Brian did a good job of covering that program. But when you do get into different territories of cooperative utilities or municipal utilities, you'll see other policies. Some of them have net metering. Some of them have what's called a buy all sell all requirement, and that's a program in which a customer that has solar PV behind their meter is required to sell all the power generated to the utility at a wholesale market rate usually, and then you purchase all the power from the utility at the normal retail rate. Another option is if you don't have on-site solar, is to do procurement through a green tariff. And Duke Energy has a tariff where you can elect to have a portion of your electricity be renewable, and you usually pay a premium price for that. Another way is to purchase renewable energy credits, and that means that they're basically credits that are associated with renewable energy. And it doesn't mean though that the electricity is generated in our state. It could be generated in Texas or another state. Finally, there's what's called a power purchase agreement, and this is not typically allowed in North Carolina, but there is a instrument called a virtual power purchase agreement, where you're not actually buying the power from a third party, but you're actually paying for the renewable attributes of that power. And then one option that I did not list on this slide, kind of ran out of room, is community solar. It's not as prevalent and only available in some places. And that's a program in which a utility develops a solar project and will sell either shares or subscriptions in that project to customers. And Fayetteville PWC is an example of a utility that has that. They have a 1 megawatt approximately system that has subscriptions available for residential and for business customers. Now I'll talk a little bit about solar PV site analysis. We have a bunch of different tools we use for PV site analysis. We actually have tools where we can go out to the site and measure the amount of solar energy. We can check out the shading that might happen on a solar array. You usually want to install an array where there's not going to be shade on it. It's going to have good sun access all the time. And then we have software tools that we'll use. And one of them is NREL's, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory System Advisor module. And in this tool, you have a bunch of inputs that go in there, weather data for your location, specifications for the PV modules and inverters and other pieces of the system. You count for losses, and then the program can go through a calculation to show what would be the production hour by hour of the PV array, considering what the typical meteorology or climate of the site looks like. And then, so you end up with how many kilowatt hours per hour, and then you can figure out how many per month or year. And then we apply some different factors based on the costs of the system, how much you might get paid or how much it's worth to you based on the utility costs right now and the tariffs. We look at in their financing, or as well as incentives, such as the investment tax credit or depreciation. And then, the output here on the right shown, we'll get a readout of, different metrics for the system, how well it's performing, energy wise, what is the value of the power. In this example here, I think this is a 500 kW AC system. It ended up with a net savings of about $42,000 per year. And this was modeled using a Duke Energy time of use rate, so a rate where you would have to be on under the new Duke Energy Progress Solar Choice program. That works out to about 5 cents a kilowatt hour, for the value of the solar that you're producing. And in this case here, I believe we included the maximum tax credit of 50%, assuming that the project would get some of the bonus credits for that Brian mentioned. And the simple payback for this project would be just under 10 years. I wanted to show a couple of different examples, and this is a tool we use called Helioscope, which uses aerial photography GIS data to basically model solar for a site. An example on the left is a warehouse example. And it's pretty straightforward, and the client wanted it to be ground mounted. So we found a place where there was a sort of a berm that was sloping to the south, I guess east, south, west, southwest. And in the right example, you see an existing building where the solar could be installed, but in a kind of way that respects different structures or equipment that's already on the roof, and avoids shading from those pieces of equipment. You can't always avoid shading, but you do want to minimize it. And this program would helps us to figure out, the optimal way of doing that, and making the most of the roof space. And with these two sites, it's a very different kind of outcome. The site on the left, the warehouse, it had a 230 kW peak demand, and the Duke Energy tariff for that location only allows you to put in a system that's sized up to your annual peak. Being a warehouse, though, it had fairly low electricity usage for that peak. And so you see here that whereas the electricity usage is in the orange and the solar is in the blue, you're actually able to generate a good portion of your energy requirements using solar. And the good news, I guess, from this diagram is maybe only in 1 month in May do you actually exceed what you consumed. And so that little piece that's left, the difference there would be credited back to you at the lower rate. The example on the right, the manufacturing facility, it's a pretty high load factor facility. It's had a 2,200 kW peak demand, but pretty steady load. And now this is in Duke Energy Carolina. So as of now, you're only able to put in a 1,000 kW PV array. So you can see the blue is probably around 20% of what you're actually consuming. Under the new Duke Energy Progress tariff, and if Duke Energy Carolina looks similar to that, you'll actually be able to probably generate a good deal more. You can go up to the well, I guess you can go up to 2 megawatts for this site, so you maybe be closer to 40% of your consumption with solar. Another big consideration is solar PV system costs. So that was the performance. These are the costs, and so it's a moving target what the solar PV system costs are. In general, costs of PV modules and other equipment have been coming down over time, pretty dramatically. Although in recent years, we've been seeing some effects of inflation as well as increased demand. Even the ITC increased demand for this equipment because of more companies and individuals wanting to do solar. NREL does a good job of tracking costs over time. And here you see a chart that shows pricing from the third quarter, really the second quarter of 2023 for some select states. You'll see I would pick probably the middle range here. 100 kW to 500 kW fits a lot of commercial sites, but you could get into bigger ones for larger facilities. So you're basically somewhere in between $2 and $3 a watt for that size of solar project. And there's a lot of different factors. I won't go through them here to make sure Pierce has time to talk about his project. But we can help you with an understanding of these factors. But the best thing in the end really is to get a quote or quotes from solar installers. I guess the final thing I did want to share is an invitation for those of you who are in the manufacturing or industrial community. We have a dialogue meeting coming up on Wednesday, November 29th, located in Raleigh. And the goal of this workshop here is to support DEQ. They're in the process of working on a planning grant under EPA's Carbon Pollution Reduction Program. And as part of this process, they're trying to identify measures that will have a big impact in the state, and including the industrial sector, on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And these measures could be included in a future proposal for implementation funding from EPA. So we really would like to hear what the manufacturing community has to say, have what their needs are, and what would have a big impact in their in their work. So with that, I guess I will stop sharing here. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to hearing from Pierce.
Great, thank you, Isaac. All righty, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can, Pierce.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, so my name is Pierce Schwab. I'm the Sustainability Program Manager for Sierra Nevada's Mills River location. I wanted to thank ESI for inviting me to speak about our solar installation today. First, a little bit about who Sierra Nevada is. We were founded in 1980 in Chico, California by Ken Grossman. We were originally in a small warehouse using old dairy equipment. Ken named the company Sierra Nevada after the Sierra Nevada mountains, where he spent time hiking and climbing. He is an environmentalist at heart and built the company in alignment with those values. Today, we're still privately held and operated by Ken and his family, and we're the third largest craft brewery in the country, 10th largest brewery overall. The principles he founded the company on are still guiding our future today. So in alignment with those values, Sierra Nevada owns and operates the largest solar installation in craft beer. It's more than 2.6 megawatts of installed solar capacity between our two breweries, and that's 2 megawatts in Chico and 600 kW in Mills River, where I am, and that's on the right side. In Chico, our solar produces about 20% of our overall electricity needs, and the system in Mills River produces around 6%. When we built the brewery here in North Carolina, as Isaac alluded to earlier, we were limited to that 1 megawatt of self-generation. So we've got a 600 kW system. The other 400 kW on site here is supplied by microturbines, and those are running off methane that we generate from our wastewater pretreatment plant on site. So I want to share a little bit about our installation process. It was commissioned in 2014 and took about 120 days to install. It included a 550 kW AC rooftop array, and that covers about 2 acres of our packaging warehouse's roof. We also included 9 solar trees that I'll talk about a little bit later, and those provide light and shade in our guest parking lot. Our precast concrete roof provided a really nice surface for laying out some locally fabricated EcoTop rooftop mounting structures, and the rooftop system's 250 kW and 300 kW Solectria inverters. Those are located on the opposite side of our cold storage warehouse from the canopy arrays. So because guests can't see the roof, we included these 9 parking lot canopies. Those have a total capacity of 50 kW, and they were custom designed to create shade during the day and then provide light at night. Solar installers on the call will raise their eyebrows at some of the support beams we have, providing some shading, but those were necessary due to the weight of the fabricated structure. So it's minimal shading, but it is still there. So I want to share some statistics as well. So like I mentioned earlier, it's a 600 kW AC system, and that's 550 kW on the roof, and it's in 50 on the solar trees. It's a total of 2,030 rooftop panels on the roof, and then 198 on the solar trees. The installation was ballasted low slope roof mount with a 10-degree tilt. And then we use a company called Also Energy. It's our power output monitoring dashboard. Generates about 650 megawatt hours per year and about 6% of the brewery's total power needs. I also want to share this. This is from that dashboard I mentioned from Also Energy. We've been seeing some decline over time, and that's primarily due to a series of inverter failures. So just kind of sharing full transparency, it's been a great investment. It's worked out well, but we have had quite a few inverter failures. And then we've struggled with keeping the panels clean. So we've had some mold issues here covering the panel tops. We have since increased the frequency of cleaning, so that happens almost once a year now, and that has increased output here in the later years. So this is from 2014 when we installed it up to today. So we're looking at our 10-year anniversary next year for installing the system. So like I mentioned earlier, it's only providing 6% of our power. So we purchase renewable energy credits through NC Green Power every year to make sure that we are producing beer with 100% renewable energy. And then finally, I want to share my contact info. That's my email address down at the bottom. Feel free to follow up with questions or comments or more information about our system. Happy to collaborate with anyone looking to install solar at their facility. And with that, I'll hand it back over to ESI. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Brian, Isaac, and Pierce for all that great info. So Jesse, if you want to unmute and take control, do we have any questions that have already come in?
At the moment, there are no questions that anyone's put into the chat. But a question for Pierce regarding the cleaning. What's your cleaning process for the solar panels, and I guess kind of how long does that take to do all that?
Yeah, so we do that in-house at the moment. We're actually going to be using a third party here in the future, but since 2014, we've been doing it here. Our brewery support team and sanitation team takes care of that in an annual rotation. It's pretty simple to get up there with scrub brushes, a mixture of dish soap and a little bit of bleach, and that seems to do a good job with getting the mold off the panels.
Okay. We did have a question come in on the chat. How many kilowatts does a solar panel produce per square foot? I don't know if anybody who would be best to answer that question, but
I can answer that question there, and you know, there are a wide range of solar panel efficiencies, and so um, the the amount of energy produced by area um, does vary a little bit. And you know, I'd say maybe about 10 years ago, it was typical to say that you know you'd get about 10 watts per square foot of area of your solar array. Now there's much more efficient panels on the market or modules on the market, and so you're probably getting closer to 15 watts per square feet and then there's also a new type of module called a bifacial module, which has PV collecting or sunlight collecting cells on the front of the module as well as in the back of the module. So the front is getting direct sunlight and the back is getting reflected sunlight. So that's a neat way to get more in a smaller area.
okay, thank you. Bill Covert, we noticed early on that you raised your hand. Did you have a question?
That must be a no, Jesse.
I guess that's a no. I see that he unmuted him. He's unmuted, but okay. Regarding the cleaning of the solar panels, does the bleach on the metal harm the panels at all?
We use a very dilute solution, so it hasn't been an issue for us in the past, no.
And then, are there other renewable tariffs available from Duke beyond NC Green Power? And what are the costs?
That's an Isaac or
Yes.
Brian.
Yeah, for buying renewable energy credits rather than installing the system on your own roof. I think Isaac mentioned the green tariffs, which is kind of like NC Green Power, but a bit more direct, where Duke Energy would serve as sort of the middleman between the facility and an actual solar project. And your bill would reflect whatever purchasing price you agree to for that electricity produced by this other system. So it's similar. It's kind of like NC Green Power, kind of like community solar, but a bit more direct. And of course, Duke Energy sits in the middle of it, which is where they like to be.
Yeah, and that program is right now. It's gone through different names, but right now it's called the Green Source Advantage Rider. And you know they actually have right now a bunch of capacity available, about 38 megawatts they say available to large business customers, and it's really a kind of a negotiated agreement between Duke. They don't publish you know the prices, but it is typically going to be a premium so that they can cover their costs.
All right. For this would kind of be to recommendations from all three of you. What is the best approach to start looking at a system?
Well, I guess, the best approach to me is to, first of all, make sure you implement as much energy efficiency at your facility as you can in terms of, your lighting, HVAC systems, and insulation. That should be obvious. But, sometimes we have to tell people that. But then, in terms of, starting to look at it, solar installers are really great at coming out to the site and looking at it and telling you what you can do in terms of rooftop or ground mounted solar for your site. um, we could also help you with that in some capacity. Like I said, we have this helioscope tool where we can evaluate your rooftop or your ground mounted opportunities. um, so there's, and then another way too, I think you'd really want to start by connecting also with other companies or organizations that have had solar installed to get referrals from you know the parties that they worked with. And I only say that because there it is a market. North Carolina has been very lucky to have had policies that supported renewable energy. The renewables and efficiency portfolio standard came into effect in 2010. And so we've seen a really huge growth in solar in the state, primarily in the utility sector, but also in the residential and the uh, the commercial sector. But because of that, there's a lot of companies that are not so scrupulous in their dealings. And so there are some, there's just some, consumer protection, that is needed out there. And, I think just getting referrals, I think would be an important recommendation.
Okay. And then is anyone else seeing reductions in electric power emission factors from Duke Energy from their energy tracking system?
Interesting question, Pierce. Do you track GHG for the Mills River site?
We do, yeah.
Okay, and I guess as I understand, Duke gives you every year what their like carbon intensity or GHG intensity per kilowatt hour, megawatt hour is.
Yeah,
So
we use that for scope 2. I don't have it up right now, but I do believe there was a decrease in this most recent emission factor. Yeah.
yeah, and that's what we've been seeing traditionally. We use a tool that the EPA puts out called eGrid, where basically they publish um, historical data on grid emissions for all the utilities or utility territories around the country. And yeah, because Duke has been retiring coal plants, there has been a marked decrease in their intensity of greenhouse gas emissions per megawatt hour over the past 10 years. And there has also been because of all this solar, we have a lot of solar in the state too. I don't know how much it's producing. It might be somewhere from 10 to 20% of our power now actually closer to 20% comes from solar in the state. So that's had a big impact on that carbon intensity for all of the um, generation on Duke Energy's grid.
We had a question come in regarding the presentations. Yes, we will be able to share those presentations. Marcia, did you want to remind everyone how those were going to be shared?
Absolutely, I can do that. So we'll have to do a little bit of magic behind the scenes to make sure the recording is perfect and suitable for public consumption. And then they'll go up on the ESI website, www.ncesi.org. And it will be listed up under our, I wrote it in the very first post up in the chat how to get to it. Let me just scroll back up there. Navigating to our events section of the website and then looking for our energy management series information. But you should be able to access those early next week. I did want to mention, I saw that one question came in about how do you start? That's from an ESI member. So you're going to be getting a survey once we all close out. So if you can either put in there what assistance you would like, either that's from ESI or from our partners, or your coach can reach out to our staff and help you along the way. We had some renewals this week at our ESI advisory board, and I learned that we have 2 members that have installed solar. So Isaac, we can help with some of those recommendations for folks to that have already installed some solar at their facilities.
All right, we've had another question come in. Can you discuss PPAs for industry seeking to meet corporate carbon reduction mandates, i.e. where supplier companies are helping invest in mega solar projects through large end customers like Amazon or GM?
I could take a shot at it, unless you want to, Isaac.
Go ahead, Brian.
But in a deregulated state, that's a state where customers can choose their electricity provider, or can, if they're large enough, can purchase power from the wholesale market. That's a pretty common thing that could happen. In a regulated market like North Carolina, we do not have the choice in where we buy our electricity from. And PPAs with third parties are not legal in this state as part of the regulatory trade-off. The state regulators get to oversee how the utility sets their rates, and in exchange for that, they have a guaranteed monopoly on their service territory. So in North Carolina, anyway, the only real option for something like that would be this green source advantage, I believe, is the name for it, or customer ownership of the system outright, or potentially a system lease. Whereas if you're in an unregulated market, again, a lot more options available to you.
All righty. Well, it looks like that was our last question, which is perfect timing. We're right at 2 p.m. So I'm going to share our last slide with everyone. So as you're leaving the webinar today, if you would complete our survey, that helps us continually improve our program. We're going to ask you for ideas on future events here under our Energy and GHG series. As I mentioned, those webinar materials will be posted to our website. So there's the address there again. If you're not familiar with ESI and want to learn more, there's our general service account. And we've also got the contacts for our 2 program managers. So thank you to Brian, Isaac, and Pierce again for taking their time, sharing their knowledge today. And thank you to each of you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Marcia.